It was like no cry I had heard from her before. Terrence had gone to badminton while I stayed in the office with Rayleigh. I had just put her to sleep and started working on some of my projects at my desk. And then suddenly, Rayleigh let out this huge scream. Usually when she wakes up, she whines a little and you can just stick a pacifier in her mouth and she's good to go. But this cry was completely different. It was a cry I've never heard before. Just straight screaming, with no warning. I thought she was hurt, like she fell or something. I ran to her and she was just squirming and screaming. I quickly picked her up and tried to comfort her, but nothing was working. She was crying and what's going on? I was stuck in the office with no means of transportation, no money. I contacted Terrence for help. I could hear Terrence's keys jingling as he ran up the stairs to our office. As soon as the sound of the keys reached us, Rayleigh stopped crying. Terrence popped into the office and Jubilee immediately smiled. "What's wrong? What's happening?" Terrence asked, and now I felt so silly. I tried to explain, right before you came, she was really crying. I mean, she was crying a lot and it was a weird crying, but as the words kept leaving my mouth, I could feel like, oh my gosh, like she's a baby, she cries. Maybe I was overreacting. I completely wasted an opportunity for Terrence with his badminton ministry. But Terrence just remained quiet. He helped me pack up the things and put a now happy and well-behaved baby girl into the car. I kept trying to defend my action. I kept saying, I promise it was not normal. It was really bad. And he would say, I believe you. When we started driving away from the office, Terrence said,
"You know how babies are really sensitive to spiritual matters? Maybe this was spiritual." Recently, our CIC office, the Thai district, has been going through some obvious spiritual warfare. Thailand is beautiful, but just as the Lord is at work, we know that the enemy is at work here as well. Everyone is thinking about work, ministry, what's the most important, but we tend to forget something or someone, the enemy.
A long time ago, I read a story about a missionary who was assigned in a war-stricken country in Africa. It was a super dangerous situation. He was asked, "How long are you going to be there?" And his response, "When it stops hurting." After 2 or 3 years, he stepped over another corpse, another victim of the war, but this time he felt nothing. He had become numb to the sting of death. He returned to his home country soon after that. How often do we stop and mourn at the shrines in our neighborhood and the Watts in our village? We have been so concentrated on our work and ministry that we have become numb to the spiritual battles around us. What has the enemy made us numb to? Sometimes we put a face to the enemy. It may look like a political party or a figurehead, a movement, a co-worker. The enemy will always try to distract us from himself.
Last night, I walked into the badminton court with so much animosity. I always knew that I was the Filipino to beat in the Thai badminton court, but this time was different. I felt threatened by the very people I was reaching out to. I saw them as opponents. I saw them as my enemies. I've never been so driven to win and beat them. And I beat them. And I beat them so badly that I noticed later on the discomfort in their faces. I can tell by their body language that they weren't enjoying their matches with me anymore. It was no longer fun. It was a completely different Tao, the nickname they gave me. I was selfish and I forgot the very reason why I was there. I was no longer winning souls for Christ, but instead I was winning for myself. I got so caught up in the game that I forgot the master plan. After finishing my third match, I received that disturbing message from Ingrid, and I had to rush back to them.
Maybe Rayleigh was screaming because she had a nightmare, or she was hungry, or just uncomfortable. Perhaps we're overthinking and overreacting.
But one thing is for certain, there is an enemy, and he is not who you picture him to be.
No, he is not the person you are arguing with on social media. He is not the one you are in conflict or in disagreement with. Ephesians 6:12 reminds us that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms.
Maybe whatever is causing darkness, confusion, and division in our world today spooked Rayleigh. Whatever it was, the Lord used that scream to help us look around and ask ourselves, what is the true face of the enemy?